Another Countdown Online web extra, and it's my pleasure to be joined again by Eliot Spitzer, former governor of New York, Attorney General, and I believe, did you not also do a television show?
I did, at one point, a brief memory of it.
And
you worked there once.
I worked there twice.
Twice.
And then I worked at the other place you used to work at. And this is the first time we've actually run into each other.
We have more in common than either of us knew.
Yeah, seriously. Well, so as I've also experienced this year, there are periods of time when you don't have a television show or you can't really weigh in perhaps on topics that have gone by. And now that we've sort of passed, each of us has passed through that interregnum, I wanted to get some of your thoughts while you're here on various things. Walk me through what happened to the Democrats in the debt deal, which might as well be spelled D-E-A-T-H rather than D-E-B-T.
It's very easy. They were taken to the cleaners. Okay. Then they were taken to the cleaners again. Mm-hmm. And then if there was still a spot of dirt, they were taken to the cleaners again. They caved. But the reason for that goes back to last December. In other words, they were negotiating. The president was negotiating with people who were absolutely crazy and wouldn't give an inch. But he gave them the power to negotiate last December when he agreed to $2 trillion in revenue cuts without back then saying the price for that, even though he never should have done it. The price is raise the debt ceiling now. He said, I'm giving you everything you want, and I'm giving you another chance to get even more because this was clear as day that it was going to happen. A disastrous negotiating strategy. This White House doesn't know how to negotiate. Do
you think, though, by maybe on pure luck, that the certain polls that we've seen, like the one that CNN put out just today, that suggested that 59% of the country is disapproving of the Republicans as a generic party? I'm not talking about specific policies or in some areas, but 59% was the largest number for either party in 20 years in that poll. Does it suggest that in some sort of inadvertent way, the Republicans, without realizing it, bought the bad economy from the Democrats and party, that they did not come off as well as they thought they did, that perhaps the president won by losing, to use a sort of inverted term?
Yes and no. Look, maybe. I mean, if you fast forward to November, a year from this November, do I still think that the president is likely to win? Sure. Yeah. But understand the dynamic here. The way I see it, the Republicans are fighting primary fights because every Republican lives in fear of somebody attacking from the right. And so no matter how conservative they are, they got to keep moving that way. And so Boehner is being held hostage himself by the Tea Party. The president, therefore, is speaking to a general election electorate. So he's doing better in that regard. On the other hand, the presidential candidates for the Republican Party aren't in the Congress, obviously. Or I'm presuming if it's Mitt Romney or Huntsman or even Rick Perry, who knows what's going to happen. Although Perry's not going to be a serious candidate nationally, I don't think. Maybe there's wishful thinking on my part. But I think Mitt Romney could be a serious contender despite that 59 number.
Well, but there's still Michelle Bachmann, too. There's not. Yeah, but is there anything? But in the last 10 years of American politics, is there anything that tells you that the craziest thing can't possibly happen? It would seem to me the craziest thing is the most likely thing to happen.
The craziest thing keeps happening, and that's what has been so. I was just saying earlier this evening. I remember in 1968. I was 9 years old, saying one of my first political thoughts, saying we can't possibly elect Richard Nixon, and then so there you have it.
Well, I mean, how many in 1990? How many of the succeeding presidential nominees for each party, let alone the the president,
impossible.
Just how many of them would you have been able to predict in 1998? And the answer is some people might have gotten one right. Maybe people who saw George Bush.
Right. On the Republican side, where there is a greater sense of structure and it's his turn, therefore people sort of rise up through the ranks.
All right. Back to the debt deal and two specific things. S&P and their decision to downgrade. Is there some reason that they have credibility in this equation, having been the ones who kept the AAA credit ratings for all of these phony baloney banks?
S&P, Fitch, Moody's should be completely, totally disregarded, irrelevant, never, never, never base any investment decisions on anything. They say these people have been wrong on anything that ever matters. It is mystifying to me that they still exist.
But was it wrong, or is there something more to it? Is there something some malfeasance involved in this?
I don't think it's malfeasance. I think it is sort of, okay, guys, you gave us such a hard time for not being tough enough on the subprime debt. We'll show you. Now we'll point the finger back at you and say you're no good. It was sort of a false sense of Schadenfreude saying, we got you now and we'll turn it back on you.
Is in your opinion, the super Congress, the super committee that's going to cut the $1 trillion unless they somehow tie 6-6, is this constitutional?
Yeah, I think it's constitutional.
Is it just like a super joint committee?
Well, you're right. I mean, it's constitutional because the committees that effectively merge various bills passed by either house are constitutional, and the committees have their own, the houses have their own internal rules that permit them to arrive at decisions. It's constitutional. It's bad governance.
Right.
It proves once again our failure, our inability. But the way I see it, look, positive sum politics is easy enough. You're splitting up more money. Zero-sum politics, where you're doing limited pie, is hard. Negative-sum politics is impossible. And this is what we've been in for the last decade, and we're failing at.
How did Max Baucus wind up on this committee, as was revealed tonight?
I'm mystified by the choices. I'm mystified that John Kerry's on it.
Yeah.
But for the simple reason, why does he want to be? And, he has enough weight to get there. I was surprised. I hadn't heard his name in the mix, and I said, that's kind of interesting. I don't know where he stands on some of these issues. It's going to be interesting, painful to watch, but interesting.
But is as I suggested on the air, is Baucus on there because there's some thought that the Republicans are going to name Teddy Roosevelt or Abe Lincoln, and you want to you got a good guy. We're going to throw a guy who leans more towards you than towards our side.
I don't have any idea what went on behind that decision process, and it's just it's going to be painful to watch this.
I recall that you were not a big fan of the Secretary of the Treasury. Has your opinion of Mr. Geithner improved at all in the last few months?
Look, it's not personal. I mean, I've known him personally, pleasant, good person. My disagreement with him is very fundamental, though. He was one of the architects of the system that failed. He helped build this infrastructure of finance that made enormous profits for the investment banks, which is fine if they can do it, if they're doing something good for the rest of society, but they weren't. And having seen the failure, he didn't understand the magnitude of the failure or the need for reform. Even Dodd-Frank, which is a mediocrity when you're done with it, he had to be dragged even to those pieces, the Volcker rule. Paul Volcker had to fight tooth and nail, and he's a big guy. When he fights hard, to get into the White House to persuade the president to do something more. Tim Geithner didn't want to. So Tim just doesn't get the magnitude of the crisis of jobs, middle-class disenfranchisement, middle-class wealth dissipation. He doesn't get what's going on out there.
It's totally off point. Is Volcker 6'7" or 6'8"?
He's big.
He's a big guy.
Every time I've stood next to him, I've had to look
It's
up.
like he's bigger than he was last time.
He's bigger than life in many ways, and deservedly gets the respect that we give him.
Now, something more optimistic.
Yes.
The Wisconsin vote, and as we record this, we don't know the outcome of the 6 recalls, and obviously we don't know next week's additional recalls. We only know that the Democrat won the first of the 9 in the series. The premise that there were reports that there was presidential level turnout for a recall in Wisconsin on a Tuesday afternoon in the middle of a hot summer. Was that cheering to you as an advocate of small d democracy?
Yes. The more turnout, the better. I say to people, if you don't vote, you can't complain. And I used to say that when people would, 20 years ago, when it was easier to get out of jury service, people would complain about verdicts. I said, when's the last time you served on a jury? They say, I don't do that. I said, well, then be quiet if you don't participate. So participation is step one. What it means, I have no idea. And I'm not going to pretend to be able to say, aha, turnout's high, and therefore
not predictive, but in the sense of value to the process.
Absolutely. I wish, I guess there's some people who say mandatory voting is the way we should go and find people that I don't know if we have to go that far. The more people who vote and participate, the better, the healthier our democracy will be.
This is one of John Dean's favorite topics. We've had many conversations about this. The idea that mandatory, which they have in Australia and many other democracies, where it's a nominal fine. It's $10 if you don't. My thought was, if you gave people $10 off their income tax, and by just sending that receipt in with it, you'd get a lot of people showing up to this.
There was another
$10 or a McDonald's coupon or anything.
There was another idea, which is you give people a lottery ticket. You just give it, and one person in the nation will get $1 million, and everybody's going to show up for that free lottery ticket.
And you don't even have to have new lotteries. Just get the ones that are in progress.
Powerball. We'd all be there.
Exactly. A purely political question.
Yes.
The Newsweek cover with Michelle Bachmann, where it looks as if she's she's sort of been hit by electrodes or something. I'm troubled by the photograph, and I'm troubled by the fact that they chose it. They released all of the other shots in the series, and she looks like this in every one of the shots. So my point is not. You could be critical of them, you could defend her, whatever. What I'm asking is, why on earth would any politician go into that circumstance and pose for that photograph knowing what might happen? I mean, I know you can't tell as you take every picture how it's going to turn out.
Because look, I've had pictures taken of me that were ghastly and that they chose to run when you're on the other side. And one part of our resume that doesn't overlap, you haven't run for, at least not that I'm not aware you've ever run for office. When you're there,
I've stuck to this trouble.
You're probably a wise decision.
Yes.
I should have listened. I should have. But you want to get out there. The cover of Newsweek. You say, I want to be there. I want to speak to the public.
Yeah.
Saying no is very hard. And she apparently thinks, this is good publicity for her.
Well,
so go figure.
All right. Okay. I know you can't, and you can't. But the thing is, she can't. She hasn't been the one complaining about it.
Right.
It's her campaign and her supporters are complaining about it, because once you go and say, I'm posing for Newsweek, it is out of your hands. You can't control it.
Think about this. Now they get to complain. They get to point the finger back at the traditional media and play into the trope of it's the big bad Eastern establishment. We understand. They're taking advantage.
Right.
So they get another storyline, which is certainly beneficial for them.
And 25 million people who don't have an opinion of her get a copy of Newsweek or see it online somewhere and go, holy crap, she's got X-rays coming out of her eyes. She'll
she
kill
must be
me.
Extraterrestrial.
Or something. Do you have, you discussed there your background in politics.
Right.
Do you have further aspirations in that regard? I keep hearing something about the mayor of New York.
I read little stuff here and there. None of that comes from me.
Okay.
The only thing I'll say is I thoroughly loved the time I had at CNN, being on camera, have the ability to discuss it. I love the time as Attorney General and Governor. I'm flattered that people throw it out there. I've said to my wife, I'm incredibly busy right now. I teach, I'm writing, family business. That's all I'm thinking about right now, and nothing else is crossing my mind.
Not even television again?
I'm here. What can I tell you?
That may be, as Mr. Gore uses the term, reformed or covering politician. That may be the first sign of that right in there, that you gave that solid an answer.
Let me just say this.
You're here.
I hate to disagree with Al Gore, whom I really like an enormous amount. There is no such thing as a reformed politician.
Okay, well, that's two great answers. Eliot Spitzer, thank you for coming in, and thanks for doing this with us.
My pleasure. Thank you for the invite.